Welcome to my second Tech Talk video. The first one I did was on walls and ceilings. This one is on insulation and floors. So let's get started with insulation. Now when I did my research for this project and this build, I discovered that insulation is a very controversial topic in terms of soundproofing. It doesn't matter who you ask, you get a different response or a different opinion from everyone. No one seems to be in complete agreement on what insulation does. So, not knowing who to believe, I did my own research, and a lot of what I found lined up with what Ultrafonic had told me as well. So let me tell you what I have discovered, and hopefully this is mostly correct. Insulation doesn't actually stop sound. It doesn't have enough density. It's light, it's fluffy, and that's not what it's for. The walls are the thing that stops the sound. These walls, double layer gyprock with green glue in between, that has enough density to actually stop the sound. The problem is when you have a wall there and you've got another wall on the outside, you've got an air cavity in between, and that's a lot like a drum. You've got one drum skin, another drum skin, and air in between, and that causes a resonance to happen between the walls. So that's where the insulation comes in. By adding insulation in that air gap, it pushes air out and it changes the density of that space and changes the way that the walls would resonate. They still resonate, but it just changes the actual frequency up or down. So, which product should you actually use? Well, if you wanted to get really specific, you would have to calculate, first of all, what is the resonant frequency of the existing structure. Then you'd have to calculate probably the volume of the depth of every cavity around your studio. In my case, every wall has a different air cavity. This one has a certain depth. The back wall is about 24 centimeters deep because it goes into brickwork. The ceiling up there is a different cavity dimension as well. So for me to get someone out here to calculate all that is a very complicated procedure, and I don't know if they could do it accurately anyway. So if you're a humble home studio builder like me and not a scientist, what do you choose? What's the right product to get? Well, the magic number, according to Ultrafonic, is 14 kilos per meters cubed. So that's a density rating for insulation, which will suit pretty much every acoustic situation. Now, you can go above that and you can go below that a bit, but 14 kilos is the sweet spot. The problem is a lot of insulation doesn't have that rating at all on the packaging. So you have to go on the manufacturer's websites, or you have to try and find that information some other way. Now the product that I bought is this one here, Earthwool, and they sell it at Bunnings. Now this rating here, 2.5, you can ignore that. That's a thermal rating, it has nothing to do with sound. Down here it's got a weight of 12.6 kilos. That's got nothing to do with sound either. That's just to do with the weight of the entire package. So according to the website, when you go and look up that code, this product is 20 kilos per meters cubed. Now that's a bit more than I would have liked, but it's fine. It's basically a little bit above that sweet spot, but it's not going to hurt at all. The other reason I bought this is because the dimensions of these bats suit my joists. So this was the only product that I could find at Bunnings when I was there that had all the information I needed to know to buy it. The other thing here you'll notice is this particular brand has the word sound absorbing on it. Now that's just advertising hype. It doesn't really mean anything. Any insulation can be sound absorbing if it's got the right properties. But in this brand, only the ones that say sound absorbing have the meters cubed rating on the website. So I was kind of limited in my choices that way. Maybe one of their other products that didn't say sound absorbing would have done the same thing, but I couldn't get the information I needed. So that's why I chose this product. And also the price was right. It's about 65 bucks a bag. Not too bad. I'm going to do a little experiment. I mentioned before that two walls and an air cavity are a bit like a drum. So I'm going to take an actual drum and I'm going to fill it up with insulation and see what difference it makes to the sound. Here's what the drum sounds like normally. And this is what it sounds like when it's been all filled up with insulation. Now, as effective a demonstration as that was, it's probably not a particularly realistic one, because you'd never take a drumstick and bash on the wall of a studio with it, which is what that just simulated. So that was impact noise. The type of sound that a studio is normally trying to keep in is airborne noise or airborne vibrations. So a true test would be if I was to yell at the top skin and then we were to put like a little vibration sensor on the bottom skin and see how much it vibrated. That would be a true indication of what the insulation's doing. But I think you get the idea. So what about up here in the roof space? Well, there's actually two distinct areas. There's the cavity between the inner room ceiling and the outer room ceiling, and that is definitely something you should fill with insulation. It'll do all the same things it would do in the walls. On top though, this is not a cavity, this is open air, open space. So if you put insulation up here, it doesn't do anything for the sound. What it does do is it helps your thermal insulation. So for the same reason you would put insulation in the roof of your house to keep the temperatures down in summer and to keep it warm in winter, you can use that on your studio if you like, but it doesn't do anything for the sound. Let's talk about the floor. Now, if you've been watching my build so far, you will have noticed that I haven't done anything special with the floor inside the studio. It's just concrete. And potentially the problem that you might have picked up on is that the concrete in there is connected directly to the outside room. So why would I have gone to all the trouble of isolating my inside room on rubber pads and making sure nothing touches the floor when the outside room has a direct connection straight through via the concrete? You can see it down here. Here's the outside room touching the concrete, and that concrete goes all the way inside and it makes up the floor of the studio. Well, my research indicates that it's simply not going to be a problem. The reason for that is that concrete has so much mass, so much density, that any airborne noise that happens in the room is simply not going to be transmitted through the concrete to the outside world, not by any significant amount. There is a kind of noise though that could be transmitted, and that's impact noise. And this is the same reason you can hear footsteps from an apartment above but not voices, because voices are airborne and footsteps are impact noise. So if I'm in this room and I'm playing a drum kit, every time I hit a drum, if it's on a stand, the vibration can go through the stand, into the floor, and out the concrete that way. That's a potential problem. Now, I don't know how bad it's going to be until it's built. So for now, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to wait and see. But I'm leaving my options open. You can see that I've actually created a little bit of a lip around the doorway here. So if I want to put a floating floor in, I can. Now, when I say floating floor, I don't mean the normal floating floor that you would get for your house. Normally you'd have a little layer of foam and then you put sort of a bamboo floor down above that. That's not going to work in terms of soundproofing. If you're going to do a floating floor, it has to be on proper sound insulating pads like these, sitting on with joists on top, with structural flooring on top, green glue, and then more structural flooring like yellow tongue. So it's going to end up being about that much there. Now, I've already got a pretty low ceiling as it is. I'm down to about 2 meters 25. So I don't want to have to do that unless I absolutely have to. But I think there's an in-between solution. I'm thinking if there's a problem with drum noise, I can create a little drum riser that sits on these. And that way it's only a small part of the floor space that has to be isolated. So for now, I'm going to wait and see and leave it the way it is and hope for the best.